Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another Round of Sound. We are live with the Super Bowl edition of the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown. I'm your ringmaster, Bob Pompiani. We have a lot to get into tonight, including the return of Marc-Andre Fleury, the goalie situation in Pittsburgh, the trade deadline coming up, the Steelers, Le'Veon Bell. But the #1 topic tonight on the #1 Cochran Sports Showdown will be one of the best Super Bowls, really, of all time. And here to discuss that with you is your panel, left to right on your television screen. We have Andrew Filipponi from the Cook and Pony Show. Middays every day on 93.7 The Fan. In the middle, it is Mr. Will Graves, outstanding journalist with the Associated Press, and Tim Benz, one of our regulars here from Steelers Radio Network and Trib Live. So we get right into this. Andrew Filipponi, when you watch this game, Philadelphia did something Pittsburgh couldn't do. They took down New England. Your thoughts about what you saw tonight?
Still kind of in awe. I mean, I'm almost speechless. I know that's not appropriate to do on TV right now, but you know, when New England went up 1 point, I thought Patriots have it in the bag. When they got the ball back before that field goal, when they were down only 5, they're going to drive downfield and win. Even after the field goal that put them up 8, okay, Brady's going to drive them downfield, no timeouts. They're going to score a touchdown, 2-point conversion. So the invincibility that I associate with New England is gone now, and it's really just a shock and surprise for me.
My response to that question, Bob, is well, after 15 minutes of solid enjoyment of Schadenfreude that New England lost, that shifted immediately to the reality of, oh, God, Philadelphia is something to celebrate. Who wants that? So I can't really wallow in the New England loss as much as I would like, but boy, there were some interesting nuggets to take away from that, huh? Like Bill Belichick burning an early timeout that may have cost them.
Clock management, baby.
Yeah, Tom Brady missing a wide-open Rob Gronkowski on a few occasions, not only throwing the ball, but not even trying to throw him the ball. On that final drive on 3rd down, he was wide open, held on to the ball too long, and got himself an incompletion that burned a couple more seconds. So, you know, it was like seeing a unicorn, the way that the Patriots managed to give away this game on various occasions. They did a lot to get back in it, too, but I would also suggest that for as well as the Eagles played, for as well as Peterson coached and Foles performed, for people who wanted to see New England stub its toe, well, they certainly did. We haven't gotten to the Malcolm Butler part of this equation, too. I'd love to find out why Bill Belichick made that decision to not play him at all when his defense was getting carved up.
I know, Tim, you used the word give it away. I think the Eagles won the game. I mean, they made calls and executed those calls to win the game. I mean, that crazy flip to Foles on 4th and goal from the 1. I mean, that's at the end of the first half. That's crazy. Going forward, what coach goes for it on 4th and 1 at their own 40 with 6 minutes left?
Good point, man.
They won. They played to win. I a lot of respect for Doug Peterson, a lot of respect for Nick Foles. By the way, Al Michaels saying, well, we don't know. They don't know what they had in Foles. He had 27-2 a few years ago for the Eagles. The guy could play and made himself a ton of money.
I'll tell you what, I'll do you one better. I think he has to be their starter when they kick off the season
No.
next
He'll
year.
be traded by then.
Really?
Well, how could you make him a starter?
They haven't won a championship since 1960, and you're going to bench a guy who didn't just – hold on. He didn't just manage the game, Bob. The last 2 weeks against the #1 defense in the NFL, Minnesota, and against the Bill Belichick defense, he was the best player on the field.
What if he's Jeff Hostetler, Andrew?
Jeff Hostetler didn't do that against Buffalo. They gave it to Otis Anderson 50 times. You've been waiting for a quarterback to lead you to the promised land forever. The last time you had a franchise quarterback in this spot, he barfed on the field.
Andrew,
now you're going to bench this guy?
What's more likely, him being traded for a 1st and a 3rd, for example, or Wentz being the starter? Wentz is your starter.
I'll take that one step further. What's more likely, them repeating with Nick Foles as quarterback, or them repeating with Carson Wentz as quarterback?
You keep them both, and Foles is the guy that starts next season.
Not if you get a trade offer.
Steelers, do you trade for Foles? Why don't you just
because Roethlisberger said he's going to play another 5 years, apparently.
Okay. Well, how about Cleveland? How about a number of teams that could use Nick Foles, and somebody's going to give a lot? We've seen what people give for starting.
The Jaguars could use Nick Foles?
You think a lot of teams could use?
So they've got a guy that just led them to a championship, and he's out the door.
What else would you do? You can't have both of them.
Why not?
Because I don't think it's as sustainable for the entirety of a 16-game season plus the playoffs.
Well, hold on. We just had a goal. We just had a town where they split the crease between 2 franchise goaltenders, and you're telling me
there was a generational gap between those guys, though.
I'm not opposed to them keeping both, Andrew.
And
but
they
I think
paid both of them,
Wentz
so you knew they could only pay one of them in the end. I mean, I think Foles' contract is still pretty amenable to the team.
It is.
Right?
All right. I got to move on to another thing, and I want to talk about this because Tonight we once again had to talk about Al Riveron. So, Will, I couldn't believe that Chris Collinsworth. I have a lot of respect for Chris. I think he does a really good job. On both occasions, he thought they would be overturned. Is that because Riveron has been so inconsistent, or because he just really thought they weren't catches? Come on, football moves were made.
I think it's safe to assume that, all four of us here, I'm not sure we could look at one play and all have the same come to the same conclusion about whether a catch was a catch. I thought
on the Ertz one we can, right?
On the Ertz one looked like it was a touchdown to me. The first one, it sucks that it looks like a small bobble like that can lead to a questionable call. But if you go, I think Collinsworth was sort of right on the first touchdown. The second one was definitely.
He was right because Riveron sent the wrong message all season long.
Right, but that's the problem. I think nobody knows what a catch is. You even had the XFL going after the NFL on Twitter saying, we're not going to screw with you about what a catch is like the NFL is.
Yeah, they were opportunistic about it, and they should be. But I was just amazed at some of the reaction I saw from some Pittsburgh media members and even fans on Twitter that were reacting to the Ertz touchdown, with anger that the play stood. What would you prefer? To see Philadelphia have that call overturned and New England benefit from it a second time and win a Super Bowl as a result, win a sixth Super Bowl? Just be happy, even though it was kind of like the Jesse James one.
It wasn't at all like the Jesse James
Not as much as we originally thought.
They both were.
It was a tight end who went across the goal line, and people were drawing
Ertz caught the ball at the 5-yard line.
Andrew, I understand. I think it should have stayed. I'm surprised that I saw as much as I did people just throwing their hands up and saying, what would have happened? Could you go back in time and change the call? I don't think that would have happened. Just be happy that the call stood.
I would say that's part of that is just sort of the realization watching the Patriots against the Jags and against the Eagles, how gettable they were for the Steelers and how the Steelers absolutely blew it. I think all the anger sort of at the breaks that the Eagles got tonight, whether they were breaks or actual calls, is just sort of the realization, my God, the Steelers blew it.
Will, you were right. The first touchdown should have been overturned. Right? His hands are off.
I don't think he lost control of it enough.
His hands are off, but his hands are off the ball, though.
No, who cares? Come on. Because be real. In any other level of football, Andrew, that's a touchdown. That's the absurdity.
But they've opened the doors to make it not a touchdown. That's what they've done.
I know, but what you said initially was right. The entire year, that play has been overturned. The entire year.
And the reason
Austin Seferian-Jenkins
is because everyone was watching, including the commissioner, who was outspoken about it this week. So he did not have the guts to do it. That's what the bottom line is.
Well, I'm ecstatic that he kept with the call on the field.
I don't know. Listen, we got to go to a break here, but we have something that we want to tell you about. Have you heard about CochranOverstock.com? It's where number one Cochran sells brand new vehicles for less because they have too many number one Cochran orders. More than 12,000 new cars and trucks a year. So it's not surprising that at the end of the year they have too many of some of these models. So what's surprising is how little you will pay for them. All brands, full manufacturer warranties, new inventory weekly. So save now at CochranOverstock.com. When we come back, Steeler Talk next. The number one Cochran Sports Showdown is brought to you by number one Cochran. Go one better. And by Highmark Blue Cross Blue Shield. Have a greater hand in your health.